I'm gonna run through and just get everyone checked in here. As I call your name, if you could just confirm that your name on the screen is correct and let me know who you're representing here today. See, we have Scott Hand.
I'm here representing Trilobite Design and Urban Artifact.
Okay, welcome. All right, and we have Scotty Hunter. Is this the Scotty Hunter that I played basketball with a few years ago?
It is, David. Good seeing you.
Okay. Full
Representing
disclosure.
Urban Artifact.
Okay, great. Good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and Trey Sheldon also here with us from the zoning department. Welcome, Trey.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everybody.
All right. Unless either of the Scotts are waiting for someone else to join us on the applicant owner side, I think we can get started. Are you guys waiting for anybody? Okay, great. Let's go ahead and get started. I need to read through our hearing script. This will basically just cover the procedure for the hearing, and then we'll jump into it. So this is the January 24th, 2024 session of the zoning hearing examiner docket. The case before us today is case number ZH20230188. That's 1660 Blue Rock Street. The purpose of this hearing is to allow applicants and any potential opposing parties to testify and to offer and refute evidence and testimony. This hearing will follow the rules found in the zoning code and the supplemental rules of the zoning hearing examiner. All testimony and evidence that an applicant or any potential opposing party wishes to offer must be presented at this hearing. The hearing will proceed as follows. I'll allow Mr. Hand and Mr. Hunter to start by presenting the applicant's case and telling me any background they think is important. Of course, the relief that they're requesting and why they think that relief is appropriate. If there were anyone here from the public, they'd have an opportunity to speak after the applicants had presented their case. I'll hear from the zoning department and Trey Sheldon to provide any testimony in addition to his staff report. In the event that any party testifies or offers argument in opposition to this application, the applicant will have an opportunity to rebut that testimony and or argument offered in opposition. The applicant will then have an opportunity to make any closing statements. After all presentations have been made, that will close the hearing. Decisions may be expected within 2 weeks. I may limit or exclude any testimony that I deem irrelevant or outside the scope of the application being considered. I may interrupt any speaker to ask questions or make any comments. In the event of any technical difficulties with the Zoom technology, I'll do my best to troubleshoot those on the fly, but to the extent there is some defect that prevents us from meaningfully going forward with this hearing, I may continue or postpone the hearing at my discretion. Okay, last thing I need to do is swear in all of our witnesses. If you intend on providing any testimony here today, making any comments, asking any questions, really doing anything other than just observing, then the zoning code requires that I swear you in. So I'm just going to collectively swear everyone in right now. So if you all could take yourselves off of mute, I need you to raise your right hand and answer out loud. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
I do. Yes.
I do.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Who's going to be taking the lead here on the presentation for the applicant? Okay, Mr. Hand.
Yes, I expected to. So the background information is that Urban Artifact occupies a historic church building in the center of Northside. It's an 1876 Catholic church building that was decommissioned. We've been in it for 9 years. We're asking for relief in order to use the courtyard space that's beside the historic church building as public dining and drinking space. So we have authorization from the state liquor board to use it as drinking space. We're asking for zoning relief in order to provide outdoor dining and drinking use. So in conversations with Examiner Sheldon, we've established that there are several different conditional use requirements that would be required in order for us to use that space per the zoning code. Those have been documented and submitted as part of this. I can run through them. That's part of the next step here.
Okay. Let's see. So it is a little difficult with the background noise. Mr. Hunter, are you able to speak on this at all? It might be a little bit easier if you could run through any of the things he was going to cover there.
I don't know the details like Scott does, unfortunately, especially
fine.
as it relates specifically to the zoning code. Yeah, that's where his expertise really lies.
That's fine. Okay, Mr. Hand, go ahead. Were you asking me if you should run through?
Yeah, do you want me to run through the list of the different conditional use items that we need?
No, so I'm aware of exactly the relief that you need. Maybe if you could talk a little bit more about. So I'm also familiar with the establishment, and I live in Northside, and I've been on the existing patio quite a bit. So how about I ask some more pointed questions? We'll go that direction.
Yes,
So,
please.
okay. So are you expanding what's already there at all?
No, the
No.
goal here is just simply to use what we've already got, but do it in the correct way.
Gotcha. So you're just trying to get everything that's existing right now properly permitted.
Yes, this is
Okay.
this has been added on to us collecting several other building and zoning code issues that we're trying to all rectify at one time.
Got it. Okay. And I noticed in the application materials, I think that I noticed that it said that there haven't been any complaints since the patio has been established. The outdoor drinking area has been established. Is that correct, that you're aware of?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's correct. So David, even some added context to that, if we've ever had anything other than just general drinking and dining out there, such as live music, it's always the music's been pointed in direction opposite of residential housing. So, on Blue Rock, if you go south, there is residential, but if you go north, there's not any residential for the rest of that block. There's Chase Public School, which, our hours do not overlap theirs. Donald McCarthy, which again, our hours, very little overlap theirs in terms of business operation. So that, I think we've been mindful of our neighbors, and I think that's why we haven't gotten any complaints that we are aware of.
Gotcha. Okay. And what are the hours of the outdoor area? Is it the same as the brewery inside?
Yes, they're the same as the tap room. It's difficult to establish different hours for the outdoor seating.
Gotcha. Okay. And is that 2 a.m.?
No, we're only open till 11 during the week and midnight on Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, and in effect, David, we probably should close an hour earlier on each of those, just because in terms of the way our business flows and the cycling of patrons is pretty sparse once you get past 10 p.m. at night.
Gotcha. Okay. And let's see, is the dining options still going to be limited to food trucks and sort of the pop-up style thing, or are you going to have a permanent food installation out there?
We are in process of having a permanent food installation. We had one previously, but we have a new vendor that is in process of getting a hood installed for full service operation. And that's a separate submission too, outside of the church property.
Gotcha. Okay. And I see that we also have a request for parking. Did you all want to talk about anything or at all about that? Why you think it's appropriate?
We have, because of the specific uses, we have a minimum requirement for the zoning code for the minimum parking allowance or requirement. We do have an agreement, a signed, essentially permanent use agreement with the school. So that is our immediate neighbor. I've worked directly with the COO, Chris Schmidt, of Cincinnati Public Schools, who was more than happy to allow us to use their parking lot indefinitely. So I know it's not the same legal requirement that we would have if it was a different form, but the school is going to be there longer than we are. So this is the very best that we could do with the immediate adjacency.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that's all the questions that I have now. Anything else you wanted to say before I turn it over to Trey? Okay. Trey? Anything you wanted to add?
You're pretty familiar with the neighborhood and so on. I've actually been to this establishment too as well. Not to the outdoor patio, but to see the Blue Wisp Jazz Band, which I loved when they were downtown. So yeah, essentially the outdoor patio, outdoor eating and drinking area was permitted temporarily during COVID, and so this is a matter of kind of given the conditional use requirements associated with it, and and that has expired and the use has continued, and Scott trying to work with the building inspector and so on this because it needed to get wrapped up for quite some time just to get this formally And it's not uncommon for some outdoor areas that were permitted during COVID to, need to kind of cross their T's and dot their I's to get official, right? And so that's essentially what's happening here. The additional need for parking stems from the fact that the sanctuary of the church is going to be well, we would consider it a meeting facility, commercial meeting facility, but it may be a venue for weddings or wedding receptions or whatnot, and other uses. Emily, the A-House Zoning Administrator made the determination that is accessory to the tap room and to what used to be, David, for context, west of the church, there's a building on the same property that was, it's part of, like, this is sort of a campus, if you will. And that building contained some office space. This was all previously permitted, and there was a pizza oven there. I think some of this began to happen back, and you can correct me, Scott, but I believe this was like a bakery or something for cookies or something that owned this, and you purchased it from them, if my memory holds.
That is correct. We used to be Queen City Cookies, and that's who we purchased the property from.
Yeah. So some of this stuff, David, was already kind of set up, and it's just had to change. Some things. I know that the permit came in recently, as Mr. Hunter pointed out, for that to have a full hood on so that they can cook things in addition to just the pizza ovens and such in that building. But it's certainly been had a commercial kitchen in there and office space and stuff for quite some time. So, but the point is more that now this sort of internal catering, if you will, service kind of will be able to provide food for people who are out on the patio or in the tap room or presumably unless someone chooses their own caterer, I presume they'd be able to provide food for events, commercial meetings, or a wedding reception or whatnot, and so on. So I just wanted to kind of explain that. Also, previous permitting for the brewery itself and the tap room pretty much exhausted all of the on-site parking. So there's just not anything more that can be done with that. As far as having additional parking, and the 2,000 square foot exemption was also utilized because that's a pretty big space for the brewery and the tap room. So essentially, there's a lot of space around the building. It's kind of unique in that Scott has a lease with from the city for the parking spaces, the area immediately in front, right in front of just south of this establishment. I guess there are lanes on both sides with parking on either side. It's kind of unusual. You can pull off of Blue Rock and into kind of a parking lane that's the right of way there. And so there are parking spaces both north and south of that. And in fact, as I said, Mr. Hand has the lease for the north side of that. So he does have, from the city, he does have that right already. And I did want to point out, as far as the parking, which is kind of my chief concern with this, because it was a pretty high ask, especially after the commercial meeting facility. It's a high number, but I would point out that, and Mr. Hand already alluded to this somewhat, is that there are sort of complementary uses. Some like in our form-based code districts, for example, allow shared parking, between uses that are not in conflict for the parking. And I know in some jurisdictions, the entire zoning code allows that. Our zoning code does not, but it's just that it's complementary to other uses around. Anything that's of a commercial nature, kind of in the manufacturing district, there, light industry or other things would be coming to work during the day, and it's complementary to the hours where this is primarily in the evening and on weekends. And same thing with the school, which is immediately adjacent to the northwest. Same principle there, unless it's an odd time when they happen to have a school play or something at night. You're going to have completely complementary uses, and that they're not going to have any conflict as far as parking demand. So there are there should be a lot of street parking around, especially to the south and southwest, where people can park on both sides of the street, and it shouldn't present a problem given the hours that that Urban Artifact operates. As to the lease that is with the school. Explained to Mr. Handy, and I had a meeting with supervisor of building inspectors, Walt Moeller, and we had a meeting, and that lease will need to come be a date for Mr. Sturkey's review. Because you're absolutely right, Mr. Handy. You still need relief even when you have a lease, because you don't have a formal covenant or something that's like, perpetual or, recorded. That's a legal requirement on your end and legally binding. But between the surrounding parking and that lease that you've entered into, it satisfied me enough that I can recommend approval on this. But I think that should be that lease should be reviewed by and approved as to form by the law department. That's typically how we handle that. So I actually made it a condition of my approval. Whether Mr. Sturkey chooses to make it a condition, that's advisory on my part to recommend that. But I think that's the course we followed in other similar parking variances. And so you would want to submit that for Mr. Sturkey's review. Other than that, I think that the only other thing that is worth mentioning is that they do seek an extra hour of time to be open outdoors, David, instead of 10 p.m. during I think you're closed on Monday, if that makes sense. You must be closed on Monday because your hours only listed Tuesday.
That's correct.
Okay, so Tuesday through Thursday, and Sunday as well. Or at least now Tuesday through Thursday, I think, are the only days they wanted to have the additional hour, if I'm correct. Yeah, Tuesday through Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
That is correct. It's just the hour after 10, from 10 to 11 on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday is the only relief that was requested.
Yeah, and that was to wrap up what I understand is weekly events that you have, activities and so on. And my only request of my other condition that I did of approval is that outdoor entertainment not be extended until that time. So, whether this is a time for you guys to kind of wrap things up, if there was some kind of activity, let people finish their brew, and if somebody was set up for an activity, that gives them time to kind of break down that whatever it is, activity is, a poetry slam or whatever it is. You have time to wrap that up. I think you mentioned multiple different activity things that you have there.
And we would have no objection to that requirement.
Yep. So let me ask on, it looks like Trey, you's included a recommended condition that there's some buffering between the north and the south of the outdoor patio. Do you want to respond to that at all, either Mr. Hand or Mr. Hunter?
We don't have any objection. The one on the south is relatively easy for us to put a landscape buffer in. The one on the north side is substantially more difficult for us to do because we still need access into the courtyard from the parking area in order to provide maintenance onto the buildings. So if we did that, it would need to be something that's somehow movable or temporary in nature, which I'm not a big fan of. But if that is a requirement, then we will abide by it. Gotcha.
What was your intention for the I guess that'd be the south buffering? That's the one you said you thought was more feasible.
Yes, we expected to put some type of permanent landscape buffering in. We're going to pick an evergreen plant or shrub that grows tall enough to work as the landscape buffer for the zoning requirement.
Gotcha. And was the buffering, was that just to satisfy the zoning requirement, or was that part of plans sort of organically outside of
the only requirement? We were only doing it because we were asked to do it as part of this.
Gotcha. And Trey, is that something they would need a variance for if they were not going to, if that wasn't made a requirement of this decision?
Oh, there's a required 10-foot buffer zone around these outdoor areas where you have to have that, and it just you can read the code section. I spelled it out there, but it requires a visual and sonic kind of separation. Oftentimes people do some kind of landscaping or in a more a smaller, more near a sidewalk context, often you see planter boxes interspersed with like fencing in between it and so on. It's practically speaking, for outdoor eating and drinking areas, it's not a bad idea to have some kind of separation there, just because you could end up with underage folks, some way of keeping somebody from walking straight onto the patio and out. So most places in a more urban context, which this is fairly urban, but I mean, downtown or one of our public squares. I've had several hearings with you where people have done that. They've done a events. We just had one for Terry's Turf Club over there, where they're going to put some leatherleaf viburnum, for example, to satisfy that requirement. So I think Mr. Hen was looking at putting magnolias or something of that nature, and I was satisfied with that. I mean, they don't need, if they don't want a permanent fence, that's their own choice, but they would need relief not to have any kind of it's just decorative wall fencing and landscaping and so on. If they didn't want to do anything, they would need relief from it, yes.
Gotcha.
I-
Okay.
Can I add one comment? We do have a separation because that's a legal requirement for the state for our liquor permit to have consumption. So there's only 2 points of egress. There's fence posts and rope to eliminate egress between. Obviously, it's not perfect, but we do have something in place. And then my other comment in regards to that is, since we do have the lease on that south portion of Blue Rock Street, I would want to have everyone take into consideration what that would look like. Should we start to use that as a drinking and eating space, which we have been granted by the city through that lease, and how that separation, what we're talking in terms of that barrier space on the courtyard versus what we would need for a barrier space on the street, and how that would actually get applied. So we're not necessarily going to have to go down this road again and have issues, because that is the ultimate intent over a long period of time. We just haven't had the immediate need or necessarily the capital needed to invest and do that properly.
I was not aware of that, so and that's not before us today. So
and I'm not sure. Could you say that again? The south property. You said the
So
property
Trey
line.
mentioned we have the lease on the street portion there of Blue X south of our property.
Yeah.
And that was granted to us originally temporarily during COVID. And then we got a more permanent lease, a 5-year lease from the city to be able to use that as eating and drinking space. And that was actually something that was pushed from the traffic, and I forget the name for that department, but in order to, try to help with ultimately people just drive insanely fast down Blue Rock down the street. And if we actually had, a more built out space there, it might, just like with greenery and trees, would help maybe slow down traffic and things of that nature. But that was the whole intent. We do have that lease there. It's no issue with the state from a liquor perspective. We would need to do some barriers like we do for our other existing drinking spaces. But I just wanted to bring that up as a point, because it will eventually tie into what we're talking about here. And I want to make sure that we're going to be in compliance, I guess, when we do make that next step.
Gotcha.
From my knowledge, I'm sure Mr. Strickey was the same way. I mean, that wasn't presented as part of the scope of this relief, and it would expand the area. So you would need some of these same forms of relief again if you were to do that. COVID was a bit of a unique creature, unique circumstance, and that people were granted temporary ability to set up things that are. And I think you must have been referring to the Department of Transportation and Engineering, to DOT,
Yep.
because you'd need revocable street privilege from them and other permissions, other than just probably the lease. I haven't seen the lease agreement. I thought it was I assumed it was just for parking or for temporary during COVID. But if you are going to expand there, you're going to need some of this relief again. Another point that's worth raising here is that there is a sign, David, that's too large. It's in keeping with the spirit of the district in terms of its appearance. It's facing southward toward Blue Rock, and you need conditional use approval to put a ground sign. But that sign's simply too big. I'm not sure what the measurements are, but it certainly well exceeds, probably more than double what's permitted in that district, and it was placed there without any permits or any review or approvals. In Mr. Hand's application, he had asked for conditional use approval to have a compliant sign, but I had no plans for that, and he and I have subsequently discussed that matter once I realized that was in his application. And in order for us to review it, he has to have plans, and he hadn't done that yet. And so I would suggest that when you have plans for that, you would need to come through for conditional use approval. This particular zoning district requires conditional use approval for any ground sign.
So let's back up here just for a minute. Let's forget about the sign part of it. That's not a part of this application. If they're out of compliance with that, then they can work with zoning and the building department to get in compliance if and when they like to. I do agree with Trey that if you do want to take advantage of that parking lane area for eating and drinking, and it's not included in the plans in this application, that would likely require you to come back for very similar relief here in the future. But going back to the buffer yard, Trey, it looks like, and just help me walk through this just so it's clear for the record. You referenced 141921 as a section that requires the buffer yard. That'd be section I. And it says that they're required when a side or rear yard of the outdoor area abuts a residential district boundary line. Is that right? And if so, does this, I'm on K just trying to do some quick work here. Does this actually abut a residential property line? And if so, in which direction?
My understanding is that it does abut a residential property line, but that is where the school is. So it's actually a portion of our north property line.
Gotcha. Okay. Got it. Okay. Well, if that's the case, is the southern that doesn't border a residential property line, Trey, would you still think that is included as a requirement? And if so, if it's necessary and appropriate?
That's actually a separate section of the code that requires visual and sonic separation, or it's also in 1419. I'll try to pull it up here.
Sure. No, I'm in that section.
The buffer yard thing, the buffer yard requirement and the surround. I think of it as kind of like the difference, David, between having, like, for a parking lot, sometimes you need a buffer yard around the use, and then you need your parking lot landscaping. So it's kind of analogous to that.
So is this just the decorative wall or fencing requirement?
Exactly. Yes. Yep.
Okay. Got it.
Which is required, and which they typically do around, there right now, to what Mr. Hunter stated, right now they just have kind of temporary, like, ropes kind of set up, I guess, from the time when it was when they were functioning on a temporary basis in COVID. So they're just I think, and state me if I'm wrong, but it looks like they're just sort of those little posts set up with kind of a cross down on the ground, like a base for it, and then there's sections of rope or something connecting these posts.
Correct.
They're permanently installed posts with rope run through them. Okay. It was the minimum requirement for the state liquor requirement to outline an alcohol consumption area.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'll leave that to your discretion, David. Obviously,
sure.
I did have to raise both of those things because there is a buffer requirement to the north, and there is a requirement to have a decorative fence or wall or landscape around it. So.
Certainly. Okay. Thanks, Trey. Appreciate your work on the staff report and your testimony. Okay, Mr. Hand, Mr. Hunter, your chance to respond to anything you've heard during the hearing and make any closing remarks.
I don't think I have anything else to add. Thank you for all the good questions, and thank you, Examiner Trey Sheldon, for your testimony.
David, the only thing that I'll add is that northern portion, that accessibility to the beer garden is ultra important, given that the church is, I don't know how tall, Scott, like 50 feet tall to the roof. Being able to get heavy machinery lifts to be able to clean gutters and just do regular maintenance is of high importance to the long-term stability of that building. So if we had to do anything permanent in that northern space for that buffer, it would become very difficult to maintain the building, if not impossible.
Sure.
I would note that it's possible to potentially do a portion of that and leave a gate or something, a double gate or whatnot. If you were to do that, that would seem to be the simple solution, is to have a gate. If you were to do this, or if Mr. Sturkey were to require you to, as the code requires, you could install some sort of a gate that would allow, even a large dump truck to come through, 10-foot wide gate or whatever. So
Well,
yeah, Trey, the gate would be essentially as wide as the area itself, with maybe 8-foot sections on either side, given that type of machinery and where we need to get. This is from experience of doing this myself for cleaning the gutters, but also having a number of roofers over our 9 years of owning the property. It's so hard to manage, even with the space as wide open as it is, and not having anything fixed. As soon as we add more posts, especially because that is, ground, and then we're dealing with not having just pure concrete, it's very, 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 very difficult.
well, it's helpful to know. I didn't have that, knowledge until this testimony. It makes sense from a practical standpoint. I didn't, I wasn't thinking about cleaning the leaves out of the gutter, which is obviously something you have to contend with, but it wasn't in my wheelhouse, so to speak. And I don't think David would have thought of that either. But
No,
yeah. So
that's why we have these conversations.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and cut through a little, unless either Mr. Hand or Mr. Hunter wanted to provide anything else.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Sure. Yeah. So like I said at the beginning, I've been on this patio. I live in this neighborhood. I walk my dog in and around this area all the time. So I'm really familiar with it. And I've read through, and I want to thank Trey for pointing this out, because I may have missed it. These additional requirements for the outdoor spaces. As we've established, it really only abuts a residential property line as far as it abuts the district that holds the school and the property that holds the school. And I don't believe that the intention in drafting these regulations was to provide a barrier between non-residential properties that are within a residential district and uses like a brewery, particularly when the hours are opposite of one another. And so I think it would be impractical to enforce those restrictions, in particular the buffer yard restrictions on this property, particularly to the north, and particularly in light of some of the concerns with maintenance that have been brought up. Also, as you, and this again helps that I've been on this patio, as you sit on this patio, there is a bit of a buffer when you have that building next to it. I believe there's still that garage or shed like structure that's in the back, and
That's
there's
correct.
some large trees that are already established on the school property or to the back of that parking lot. I mean, you really can't even see the school hardly from that patio, and so let alone any actual residences. So I don't think that's appropriate, and I may just go ahead and grant a variance, or however I can do that to avoid having to enforce that requirement. Also, from the south, it doesn't abut any residential district. It's just, I think, a manufacturing district.
Right.
There are some properties. Go ahead, Trey.
I address these exact same factors almost verbatim to what you just said in my discussion about any potential adverse effects.
Great.
I talked about how,
Great.
sound, really, this is not gonna, the closest residential property in a residential district is hundreds of feet to the, 600 feet to the northwest past the school. So.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Trey. Yeah. I mean, I agree. And I think to the south, I just don't see how imposing a buffer, whether it's vegetation or a fence or a wall or anything like that to the south, is going to improve anything. I think that the patio and the way that it's set up and the design contributes to the vibrancy of the neighborhood and is well liked by folks in the neighborhood. There's a large residential development that's about to go over there at Vandalia Point. It's close to the business district. I just don't see how that imposing that restriction on the south property line for any vegetation is going to help either. So I'm going to of course you're welcome to install whatever you'd like there, but I don't think I'm going to make it a condition of this approval, which I am going to approve the requested relief based on the application materials and the staff report and all the testimony I've heard here today and the last couple of years, where there's been no complaints and it's seemed to work well. I think I just out of an abundance of caution and just being prudent, because of course, if you guys did sell this property to another brewery, to another facility, these would all carry over to them. So you all have been good stewards and responsible owners here. But if it were to switch, I just want to make sure there are some boundaries around the outdoor area. So I probably will enforce some sort of outdoor audio or entertainment restriction as suggested in the staff report, in terms of timing. And I think I will need to take a look at the lease that you have with Chase Elementary School. So I'll make that a condition too, that I review that and approve that before this is officially permitted. But outside of that, everything else you guys are requesting is going to be approved. And that's it. Any questions? I know that was sort of a long diatribe there. Any questions about what I just said or anything that's going on?
No questions, and I appreciate that response. The lease agreement that we had already put in place with the school I had submitted it as part of the package. It's a page and a half. It's very short. It had been approved by the school, obviously, and executed, but they were willing to take suggestions. So if you have any specific language that you'd like, I can try to go back to them and get that renegotiated.
Great. Fantastic. So I'll go ahead, and if we already have that in the application materials, I missed it. I'll take a look at that and review that. And as long as it's good, it probably won't be included as any sort of condition, but I'll mention it in the decision so that that's clear. All right. If there's nothing else, I think we'll leave that. Trey, did you want to add anything?
Just, real quick, I just wanted to kind of point out that because some of those in section 1419, which covers all of the conditional uses for this, I would think that I don't think that the surrounding requirement and so on would have required any like additional relief necessarily. I mean, I think that's just all part and parcel of the conditional uses approved here. So I would think that you waiving that requirement would just be a part of the conditional use analysis. I assume you concur with that. So I don't think there's any missing relief here, if you will. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, we'll make sure that that's sorted, but from a the big picture, that's how it's going to land for you guys, just so you understand. And what I do is I have to formalize a decision in a written document. That's what typically takes a little bit longer. I mentioned 2 weeks at the beginning of the hearing. I think that's a realistic expectation here for when you guys look at the decision. I put it into PDF. I'll email it to everybody who's in the hearing here today, so you all have a copy of it really just moments after it's complete. And then once Trey has that, he can do the official approval of the zoning permit.
Cool. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you guys. Good luck with everything. And